Welcome back. Now for the news in detail. We start with Taliban, who have said they will attack all rallies, political offices and centers related to the upcoming Afghan presidential elections. In a statement, the group called on the people to reject the process and stay away from all election activity to avoid being targeted. Calling the Afghan government slaves of the US government, Taliban said they will disrupt the staged show. The statement said all major and minor roads of the country will be closed by Mujahideen on election day. It said in case of any casualties, the Kabul government and all those participating in the elections will be responsible. Earlier, former Afghan President Hamid Karzai said the elections are bound to plunge Afghanistan deeper into violence. Meanwhile, the UN has endorsed the election, saying voters must be given every opportunity to exercise their constitutional right. In a related development, NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg has called for the Afghan peace talks to be restarted. In an interview, Stoltenberg said all parties have to sit down and make real compromises at the negotiating table. He said the process must resume because a good deal is more important than a quick deal. The NATO chief said the two sides need to work together to find a political solution instead of trying to win on the battlefield. Moreover, 9.6 million registered Afghan voters will be using their right of vote on Saturday. They will be looking for peace, stability and a righteous person to lead the war-torn country. Elections officials say preparations are well in hand, but security worries could lead many to stay at home. More details in this report.
The Taliban have made no secret of their aim to disrupt the election when President Ashraf Ghani will be bidding for a second 5-year term. The legitimacy of the eventual winner will be undermined if turnout is too low. The Afghans also approve of appointing young and educated people in top government positions.
I'm very hopeful for the upcoming elections of Afghanistan because this would be my first time to vote for the candidate as a democratic, as a citizen of Afghanistan.
Ghani is up against a crowded field of 15 candidates, including long-term rival Abdullah, now serving as the country's chief executive. Despite security concerns, people want to vote for change.
I have been a blacksmith for 20 years and we want to have a good election. I call on all people to vote for a good and righteous person as the next president.
Also on the ballot this time round is Bulletin, a former warlord whose fighters are accused of killing thousands in Kabul during the 1990s civil war.
For more on Afghan and general elections, we are joined by Mr. Hamdullah Hamdard, Afghan-based political analyst. Thank you very much for your time, Mr. Hamdard. So, Mr. Hamdard, Taliban have said they will attack all rallies, all political offices and centers for the upcoming presidential elections. So, how serious is this threat?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that Taliban are in a very sensitive position at the moment. From one side, we see that Trump has stopped the peace negotiations with the Taliban, and there is no pact signed between the Taliban and the US or the Afghan government. Second thing is that Taliban have always threatened during all the previous elections as well. And that is not a very big concern because the Afghan National and Defense Forces are trying to secure the polling stations and to take care of the security of the people. These are the two sides. The third thing, which is very important, I believe that if Taliban really want to show to the world and to the Afghan people that they are really determined towards the democratic processes such as the presidential elections, the parliamentary elections, and the provincial councils or the district council elections, then they have to prove this in action, and they also have to show some flexibility in reducing the violence in Afghanistan. And I guess, I'm not advising them, but I guess that as a political analyst, I believe that if they really want to sign the peace agreement or the peace accord with the US and the Afghan government, they have to show flexibility and reduce violence, and they should not attack any polling stations during the presidential elections in Afghanistan, which are going to be held on Saturday in Afghanistan.
Right, Mr. Hamdard, and in the existing circumstances, when we have seen so many attacks in the last couple of months, so can the Afghan government avert this threat and improve confidence of the voters to come out to the polling stations and vote?
Well, there are like 431 more polling centers or polling stations that are closed due to some insecure environment, or that the Afghan national security forces could not reach them, or they could not assure the security of those polling stations. They are closed. There will be no elections in those polling stations. But the ones that are opened, they will be taken care of very properly. And the threats that Taliban are going to, I mean, they're saying that they will threaten the polling stations. They will be taken care of properly by the ANDSF, and people will definitely go to the polling stations with lots of excitement, because this time there are about like 17 to 18 presidential candidates who have done lots of campaign. They had very big gatherings, campaign gatherings, and the competition will definitely be very tough. The candidates are also accusing each other in advance of the corruption that might take place. But I guess these things are not something to be worried about very much at the moment, because the Independent Election Commission and the Independent Election Complaint Commission, they are there to take care of these concerns. If there are any corruption, if there is any fraud, they will have to submit their report, and they have to report that to the Independent Election Complaint Commission, and they will take care of that according to the procedures in the law that they have. So I believe that this time we will have a very successful election, and people are very much willing to hear from the next government, from the next president of Afghanistan, about the peace talks with the Taliban. They want to restart the peace talks with the Taliban, of course, but the peace talks will have to be led on by the Afghan government, and the US or other countries could be part of these peace talks as the third parties.
Right, Mr. Hamdard. So, who do you see as the favorite candidate, and do you see any future of the Ashraf Ghani government after the polls? Do you think he will be able to retain power?
Well, there is no doubt that all the presidential candidates are trying their best. Some of them do not have any agenda for the next 5 years, what to do for the Afghan government. Ashraf Ghani has been the favorite so far, and it seems like he might win 65% or 67% of the votes this time. However, there are some big jihadi faces for the warlord. They are with Dr. Abdullah. And there are some new candidates like Said Nurullah Jalili, Nur Rahman Lewal. They are also trying their best. But the percentage, and also Hekmatyar, the person who has recently joined the Afghan government, I mean, he has signed a peace deal with the Afghan government, and he has come to Afghanistan. He is participating in the presidential elections, and he is practically practicing this democratic process by participating in these elections as a presidential candidate. So far, the percentages, the surveys, and the pollings that have been done in the social media or through some websites, Dr. Ghani has been at the top, and in the second, sometimes there were Hekmatyar, and sometimes Dr. Abdullah, sometimes Nur Rahman Lewal, and the others had very low percentage. But let's see what people decide on Saturday. That will be definitely the people's decision. But the chances of Dr. Ghani are very high, because in every gathering and in every TV interview, he is presenting his agenda for the next 5 years. I mean, the relations, the foreign policy that he will have for the neighboring countries and for the international community and other countries, the trading policy and the internal policy, the mining extraction policy. He has got the agenda in his hand and also in his head. But let's see, how will people decide, and based on what people will decide? Will people decide based on the favoritism, or based on their relation with some warlords? or will they decide based on the agenda and program for the next 5 years, which they have heard from some of the candidates during their election campaigns? The final decision will be made in the polling stations. Of course, people will vote, and we hope the turnout will be very high this time as compared to the 2014 chaos or like very complex elections, as a result of which we had the two-headed or the 50-50 government, which was not welcomed by any Afghan in Afghanistan. We hope this time one will win with huge percentage and with huge difference, so that there is no need for the second round to go to the second round and to face those challenges which we, the Afghans, have faced in 2014. That was the answer for the favorite candidate. I personally believe that Ashraf Ghani is very much ahead because he has people. I mean, he has won the hearts of people despite the attacks or the air strikes that are taking places in some provinces which are never welcomed by any Afghan. And of course, the suicide bombers or the suicide explosions are also never welcomed by the Afghan people, and both the civilians are killed. But despite all these, still the people are willing to vote for Dr. Ghani, and let's see the result after Saturday elections.
We'll definitely see those after the elections held on Saturday. We will keep you updated on the Afghan elections. Now, moving on, Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan says Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's racist jingoism has stalled regional economic growth. Khan said he is committed to welfare-driven development, but India's jingoism is forcing the region to up its defense spending. In an interview with Wall Street Journal, he said Modi's repressive and illegal actions in occupied Kashmir will have global consequences. Khan said the world does not understand that this can go horribly wrong. Talking about Afghanistan, he said the world should not fear that a peace deal would take us back to square one. He called for the resumption of Afghan peace talks between the United States and the Taliban. The Kashmiri Americans are holding a vigil in New York City's Times Square against India's illegal annexation of occupied Kashmir. They will gather in solidarity with their loved ones who remain under an inhumane siege and occupation. The square is flooded with posters, placards and signs against Indian atrocities in Kashmir. The protest agenda is to stand up against fascism, settler colonialism, occupation and human rights violations. Protesters have decided to wear red in order to show solidarity with Kashmiris. The foreign ministers of the 8-member SAARC Council will meet today on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly in New York. Pakistan and India will attend a multilateral meeting for the first time after New Delhi's annexation of occupied Kashmir. The meeting comes amid a heightening political and diplomatic tensions between Pakistan and India. There is no separate meeting scheduled between Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi and his Indian counterpart Subrahmanyam Jaishankar. Economic growth, social progress and cultural development have been set as the meeting's top agenda. Moving on, Beijing says it will hit back forcefully at the United States for what it calls direct and unprovoked interference in China's domestic affairs. Foreign Ministry spokesman Zheng Shuang says the bill is a malicious attempt by the U.S. Congress to contain China's development. He also deplored Washington's sanctions on Chinese entities and individuals. The U.S. says violated oil sales sanctions on Iran. The statement came after U.S. Congress officially pushed a bill supporting Hong Kong protesters by putting pressure on China. The U.S. Congress and Senate will vote on the Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Bill in the coming week. If passed, the bill will require Washington to impose sanctions on Chinese officials. Now, Turkey's President Tayyip Erdogan has called for caution on blaming Iran for the attack on Saudi Arabia's oil facilities. In an interview, Erdogan said it will be inappropriate to put the entire burden on the Islamic Republic. President Erdogan said the attacks were launched from Yemen as claimed by the Houthis. He argued the available evidence is insufficient to outrightly indict Tehran. Iran has distanced itself from the attack, saying it is ready for full-fledged war. But Saudi State Minister Jubair says Iran's alleged attack on Saudi oil facilities cannot go unanswered. The US has reiterated its stance it is not rushing into war with Iran. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said Washington wants a peaceful resolution to tensions with Tehran. Now, Libya's Prime Minister Fayez Sarraj has ruled out peace talks with the head of the Libyan National Army, Khalifa Haftar. Speaking at the UN General Assembly, Sarraj described his rival Khalifa Haftar as a war criminal. He said Haftar and his supporters are coup plotters responsible for Libya's continued instability. The war between the two Libyan sides has killed over 1,000 people and left nearly 6,000 wounded. In Egypt, over 1,100 protesters have been arrested as calls for President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi's resignation intensify. The government has begun rounding up prominent opposition leaders. Thousands staged demonstrations across the country demanding el-Sisi's resignation in defiance of a government ban. The demonstrations follow accusations of presidential corruption by self-exiled Egyptian businessman Mohammed Ali. El-Sisi has dismissed the allegations, calling them lies. Such demonstrations are rare in Egypt since protests were effectively banned after the military staged a coup in 2013. The European Union says Britain is yet to provide any legal and operational proposals to break the Brexit deadlock. Speaking in Brussels, Brexit negotiator Michel Barnier said the bloc is still ready to work on a concrete proposal if the UK provides any. Barnier held talks with European lawmakers on the latest developments on Brexit. Meanwhile, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson says Brexit talks with the EU are progressing. Earlier, Barnier cast doubt over a breakthrough on the removal of the Irish backstop from the divorce deal. Now moving on to France, which says it cannot host everyone during the worsening migrant crisis in Europe. Speaking in New York, President Emmanuel Macron said there is not enough cooperation in Europe on migration. Macron's comments come ahead of a major parliamentary debate on migration policy. French Parliament will discuss the issue on September 30th and Senate on October 2nd. Macron said France has seen a sharp increase in asylum seekers since 2017. He said tighter European cooperation and quick decisions are the need of the hour. Macron faces an electoral threat from rivals over his tax migrant policies. Now moving on to India, where 7 people have died in rain-related incidents in the western city of Pune as downpours battered the city. Rescue teams recovered bodies from 3 different areas of Pune after heavy rain wreaked havoc. Fire brigade officials say 5 people died when a compound wall collapsed in Tangevali colony. They say 4 people are still missing in the incident. The Pune district collector has ordered the closure of all schools in the district. The timber industry is one of the world's leading drivers of climate change. Much of what it produces is used to make furniture. But what if we could grow tables and chairs straight out of the ground like trees? More in this report.
This is a furniture farm in Derbyshire called Full Grown, where chairs and tables are harvested like food crops. The farm's owners, Gavin and Alice Monroe, say it's their answer to unsustainable furniture manufacturing practices.
So the idea is to grow the tree into the shape that you want directly from as it grows, graft it together, and then you have one solid piece. It's a kind of Zen 3D printing.
The farm is currently growing 250 chairs and 50 tables. There's money to be made as well. One of the chairs sells for over $12,000, while the tables can cost around $15,000.
But there's so much potential. We just think there's a lot more that we could do, really. But a dining set would be nice. That would be one of the goals.
Yeah,
and then we could see
definitely.
that we've reached one of the goals.
The world has lost 26 million hectares of trees annually each year from 2014 to 2018. That is an area roughly the size of Britain. With the climate crisis spiraling further out of control each day, initiatives like furniture farming made
Daughter explaining the death and devastation in Bahamas and southeastern United States. It left thousands homeless. A music festival organization is taking its temporary accommodation skills to the Bahamas to rehabilitate the hurricane's victims. How it's being done, let's see in this report.
Insomniac, the company behind the Electric Daisy Carnival, housed 25,000 people in their luxury festival shift pods. The company is now bringing these air-conditioned, electricity-supplied homes to families in the Bahamas, affected by the tropical Category 5 storm Hurricane Dorian. However, debris, pollution and the island's rocky limestone bed has slowed the pod's deployment, and they're still being erected.
I don't want to create any similarities, but the smiles on people's faces from one of our events was the same smile on these people's faces when we were erecting these pods. They were so grateful.
The pods are weather resistant and designed to deal with winds of up to 60 miles per hour. Typically being able to house 6 people at festivals, in the storm-hit Bahamas, a family of 11 can live comfortably here as well.
At the festivals, Vegas especially, you know, we create housing, and we have food service, and we have medical service. We literally built a city in Las Vegas. We need to do that in the Bahamas.
The company is trying to bolster its charitable efforts in the Bahamas by setting up a GoFundMe page to raise more money.
Now, Sandra Muller, the woman who spearheaded France's Me Too movement, has been fined for defamation. Muller lost the case brought by a man she accused of harassment. Muller was ordered to pay $22,000 in damages and fees to ex-TV boss Eric Bryan. Accusing Bryan of inappropriate flirtation, she created the "Rat on Your Pig" hashtag in 2017. Muller said although she lost, the French women have won.
This decision does not take away from the fact that women's voices have been liberated, that you must continue to speak out, that you must continue to denounce reprehensible acts of any kind. Fear must not win. Fear must not change sides.
La peur ne doit pas gagner.
Well, she says she will appeal against the ruling. Now moving to China, the brand new Daxing International Airport has welcomed its first flight. The futuristic airport resembling a giant starfish opened in Beijing yesterday. More to find in this report.
Covering an area equivalent to 98 football fields, Beijing's glitzy new Daxing International Airport boosts infrastructure growth. It is expected to handle up to 72 million passengers a year by 2025. The pilot and crew of its first flight were overjoyed by the new mega airport.
Very excited, very excited. We have arrived in Beijing Daxing International Airport successfully.
The crew members held special activities in the air to make it a memorable experience for the passengers.
The passengers were very excited. We were so touched by the passengers' response. It is so honored for us to fly with them and to witness this historic moment with them.
The International Air Transport Association expects China to pass the U.S. to become the world's biggest aviation market by mid-2020.
The US and Japan have inked the first phase of a trade deal worth over $7 billion. President Donald Trump and Japan's Prime Minister Shinzo Abe signed the deal at a ceremony in New York. The new business pact comes after Trump abruptly pulled out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership in 2017. Calling it mutually beneficial, the two sides said the deal cuts tariffs on farm and industrial products. Prime Minister Abe said there will be no additional US tariffs on Japanese goods.
I have confirmed and affirmed with President Trump, between President Trump and I myself, this has been firmly confirmed that no further additional tariffs will be imposed, and with the entry into force all my trade agreements, I believe both of our economies will be able to further grow and develop.
Now let's have a look at the weather update across the world. With the weather update, we come to the end of this bulletin. For more news and updates, keep watching Indus News.